What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Casual Academy. My name is Nathan Karimi, and I'm joined, as always, by my cousin and co-host.
What's up, guys? I'm Kevin Zimbelman.
Guys, tonight it all comes to a head. This is Casual Academy Season 1, Pound for Pound, our top 10 fighters from UFC 1 through 10. So if you guys are joining us for the first time, do us a favor, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us a ton. We're, as of recording this, we're very close to 100 subscribers, and it does help the channel a ton, and it'll help us keep delivering this really kick-ass content to you guys on MMA history. And again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, we want to be your number one source for MMA history because, like no one else, we go fight by fight. Kevin, what is your criteria for pound for pound?
So my criteria is going to be based upon overall record. So like, how did you do, completely in your whole tenure, I guess, from UFC 1 to 10, and your level of competition. So if you got a bunch of like belts, but you didn't really beat any good competition, I didn't rank you as high as guys who maybe not have won, but beat better competition. That's kind of, who did you beat? Who did you lose to?
Okay. Mine was a little bit more based on like X factor stuff. So what separates these guys from the pack and it could be anything. It could be how many wins do they have in championship settings, how heavy was their competition, how dominant were they in each individual fight. I also tended to favor guys later on, like the guys in UFC 7, 8, 9, 10 more than I did in UFC 1 because of competition.
All right, here we go. Number 10, Season 1, Casual Academy's pound for pound list.
Okay.
We got Gary Goodridge, Gary Big Daddy Goodridge, 0-time champion. He has a 500 record of 3-3. He doesn't have any notable wins, but the only people who he's lost to are really good competition. They're guys on this list. So his strengths just kind of come down to, at least in my opinion, is just his physicality.
Yeah.
I don't think he has much like intelligence when it comes to the fight game or something. It's just he's super strong and that's it. He's big as fuck.
Yeah. He happened to be my number 10 also. I agree with Kevin. Now, in terms of notable wins, this wasn't a notable opponent, but he was the man that defeated Paul Herrera by elbow execution, if you remember that. We'll link right here to our video kind of recapping that, but that was absolutely wild. He's a great number 10, a gatekeeper and nothing more.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of his weaknesses, though, he does tap out really quickly. Yep. And I think some of those fights he could probably come back from if he gave himself the chance, but he just gives up on himself too fast.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't have a ton to add here. He's only really in the top 10 because it's the first 10 UFCs. I don't think he's going to stand the test.
No. Number 9, we have Paul Verlins. He has a record of 4-3. He's the trap master. He has devastating elbows from the clinch. He's very strong. He's very aggressive, and he's very durable. I mean, this guy can take a beating. Some of his weaknesses, though, he does have a low fight IQ. His grappling is pretty subpar. Yeah. And very sloppy on the feet, bro.
Yeah, very sloppy. I would add that he's really aggressive. He was involved in one of our fight of the nights. And I know this was not a notable win, but he did defeat Cal Worsham in a pretty epic, 45-second battle. You can check that out here. Number 8, Tank Abbott. Tank Abbott is the ultimate X Factor fighter. Really, there was not a lot to him. He had disgusting power in his hands. Definitively, absolutely more power than anyone in the show up until UFC 10, and I imagine for a little while, because when he put guys out, they went stiff. A lot of his X factors come from his persona. He's like a notorious drunk. He's like a wild man. It's rumored that Jim Brown and him had a little bit of a feud. He got in a brawl at the Puerto Rico event. Tank Abbott is just that dude. He is just a wild and crazy guy. But when it comes down to it, he fights. He also takes a beating nearly as good as Oleg Taktarov. His only notable win, meaning a win of someone who's in the top 10, I would say is kind of how we're defining notable win, is Paul Verlins. However, check out how he defeated Paul Verlins. You can look into our archives and see that. The most Street Fighter gangster shit ever. Just a knee to the dome, rubbing it in, and he's an animal. He's got several wins where you're like, oh, that's disgusting.
Oh yeah, by far the hardest puncher we've seen so far. Yeah. And I think, as I say, it will stand time for a while that he'll be that.
No cardio, and he's also not well-rounded.
No, dude, if he was well-rounded, it'd be over.
If he was if he could stop a takedown, I think he would have beat a lot of guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So number 7, we have Marco Huas. He is a one-time champion. He defeated Larry Curtin, Remco Pardue, and Paul Verlins at UFC 7, which is pretty decent competition.
Yeah.
He has his only loss is to Oleg Taktarov, but the problem with Marco Huas, at least for me, is his activity is a little low.
Yeah.
I wish he would fight more. I think he's a very good fighter. I think he's very well-rounded. He has strong leg kicks that we've never seen from anybody thus far, but he's just a little weak on the feet, and
he's just one of those guys where it's like he was well-rounded, which was enough to get pretty far back then. But nowadays he just wouldn't stand out because his leg kicks were good, but they weren't like exceptional. He had a great back taking ability. He had a lot of heart, but when it really came down to it, if he was evenly matched, he didn't seem to in the finals have that ability to like have a sense of urgency and go for the kill, So you'll see that here with our next guy. So Mark Coleman was a one-time UFC champion. Keep in mind, that was up to UFC 10.
Yeah.
So the reason he's pretty low on both of our lists, he happened to be lower on my list than Kevin's, but we compromised to have him at number 6. The quality of the wins that he has, he defeated a guy named Moti Horenstein, which we have no clue how good he could have been, but he looked okay. Gary Goodridge, who is our number 10, he's a strong gatekeeper, and Don Fry, who is coming up. And Don Fry pretty much ran through all of the competition. Not ran through, but really outworked, outhearted, and
I would say he ran through everybody.
Well, what about Brian Smith or whatever, Brian Johnston or whatever? No, he had some wars. Even Gary Goodridge he had a war with.
I guess. I feel like he was still in control the whole time, besides the Brian Johnson one.
Don Fry is great. Like, we really had a lot of respect for Don Fry. So it is a big win for Mark Coleman, especially in the finals. No notable losses up to UFC 10 because no one could stop his takedown. He's super duper strong. He's obviously got a very solid wrestling base. He does not seem to have cardio. And his striking for modern standards, or even like progressing into an old modern, his striking is awful.
I would say it's really bad even for like UFC 10. His striking is bad,
like, especially against like a Don Fry.
Right.
But Mark Coleman was. You realize he's something special the second he steps into the cage.
Oh, absolutely, bro. The way he beat Don Fry was like, holy shit.
And we went back and watched it a second or third time. It's way worse than I realized.
Yeah.
Now, I do remember having an asterisk on Mark Coleman and on Don Fry. They both fought through 2 other very, very long, hard fights that they won to get to the finals. I want to see Don Fry and Mark Coleman fresh.
Yeah,
because that is a different fight, and Don Fry did not have much to offer, and might have been because he was extremely exhausted.
Yeah, that's true. I do want to reiterate Mark Coleman's ground and pound, though. Mm-hmm. Like, my God, bro, it's brutal.
Yeah,
it's so relentless. It's just nonstop. Yeah, Mark Coleman's that guy.
Dig into the archives once again, man. We got wicked ground and pound coming from him. Absolutely disgusting headbutts. He really revolutionized ground and pound.
Absolutely. So number 5 is Don Fry. He's a one-time champion. He won at UFC 8. He beat Thomas Ramirez, Sam Atkins, and Gary Goodridge. His only loss is to Mark Coleman.
Yeah.
So that's what really make Don Fry very impressive, in my opinion, was he just beat everybody besides Mark Coleman.
And it seems like he was not going to lose to anyone but Mark Coleman.
Agreed. He has a lot of power in his hands. One of his fights on UFC 8, man, it was like a touch of death.
Oh, the Thomas Ramirez fight?
Thomas Ramirez, yep.
Yeah. Again, check, dig into the archives. Here it is. Awful knockout.
Oh, yeah. Don Fry, he's strong. I mean, he has good wrestling. He's very good in the clinch as well. I mean, he picks his shots really well, and he has good cardio. I mean, Don Fry is pretty great all around, besides his takedown defense.
Don Fry is kind of that next level of well-roundedness where it's like he's not just decent everywhere, he's good in a few spots and then certainly decent everywhere. The only thing, like you said, that didn't hold up was that takedown defense, and that was... I don't want to say inconsequential.
Also, that's only against Mark Coleman.
Only against Mark Coleman, even though Big Daddy Goodridge took him down.
Yeah.
But a lot of times he would pop right back up. His cardio is really good. He's a gamer. He's an absolute gamer. Power in his hands, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Don Fry is a very deserving number 5. He was a really a force in the first 10 UFCs, or in 2 or 3 of the first 10 UFCs.
So number 4, we have Oleg Taktarov. He's a one-time champion. I mean, when you talk about heart, it's this guy, man.
Yeah.
This guy, he just does not quit. As we said, Russians don't throw in the towels, bro.
Yeah.
He was getting fucked up and was still just like pressuring and continuing on.
Yeah.
He has big wins. He has a win over Tank Abbott and Marco Huas. His only losses is to Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn, which is like the top of the top.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So he's pretty crafty. He has like some well-timed submissions. Like when people are like in control, he'll go for guillotines, heel hooks, and kind of turn the tides of fights when he can.
Yeah.
Very durable. His biggest weakness, though, is by far his cardio.
Yeah, now we did see him in some extreme circumstances, but like... and we have that linked. You can, dig into our shorts archive and find when he fought Tank Abbott, he basically died after the fight. They had to bring in oxygen into the ring, and like he was laying on the ground, couldn't stand up. But the thing is, it's because he puts it like he does not give up. He does not tap. He does not look for a way out. He's just constantly trying to at least survive. And we're both big Oleg Taktarov fans. Kevin, I had him lower on my list. Higher. He was like number 6 or 7 for me. Kevin had him at like number 4 or 3, and we kind of agreed to put him here. And I'm real happy with it.
First Russian champion.
Yeah.
So that's big.
I would urge people to go back and look at Oleg Taktarov because he's definitely one of these names where like people are not just remembering him like a Dan Severn, but he was a bad motherfucker.
Absolutely. One thing I do want to say also is like if you see UFC 7, how it says a draw against Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
So for back then in those times, they really just fought to a draw. I mean, there was no winner, there was no decisions. But we're looking at this with like a modern MMA lens, and in that fight, I mean, Ken UD'd him.
Yeah, definitely 50-45 if there would have been judges.
Right.
But with those old rule sets, he hung on and stayed in and hit a draw. It was a legitimate draw back then.
Yeah, for sure.
Our mutual number 2 is the 3-time tournament champion, Royce Gracie.
Yeah, man, Royce Gracie is incredible. I mean, his early UFC runs were just remarkable, bro. He was fucking untouchable. Mm-hmm. I mean, he beat everybody with ease without even throwing a strike, without getting touched. But I do have a couple asterisks on Royce Gracie's record, in my opinion. In UFC 3, he defeated Chemo, and then when he was about to fight Harold Howard, he withdrew from exhaustion.
Yeah.
And so, in my opinion, I kind of count that as a loss.
Sure.
But, officially he has no losses. Another one is in UFC 5, where he drawed against Ken. In my opinion, he lost 50-45. I thought Ken was in complete control the whole time.
Yeah.
But on paper, no losses.
Absolutely. Fair. That's a fair way to say it.
Yeah.
And he did. I mean, he was just getting grounded, pounded from full guard for what the equivalent of 5 rounds. It would have been a 50-45, but the rules were different then, so we can't quite say it. A lot, believe it or not, guys, and maybe this is just kind of the mythology of the Gracie family and all of that stuff. Kevin and I were very disillusioned about Royce for a while because he really only won UFC 1, 2, and 4. And then these super fights started. So we were like, well, where is he? Where is he when there's guys like Dan? He did catch Dan Severn in a triangle or whatever, which was awesome because Dan's massive. But where was Royce during the
Oleg Taktarov, Marco
Huas. Where was he against Don Fry? Where was he against Mark Coleman? Where was he against Brian Johnston? Kind of like a random. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding Royce. But if you don't look at what he didn't do and you only look at what he did, he might be the best. Look, UFC 1 tapped Art Jemerson, tapped Ken Shamrock, tapped Gerard Jurdeau. All 3 of these guys were in their respective thing very good. The next one, Minoki Ichihara, really nobody. Jason DeLucia was definitely an athlete. Remco Pardell, a black belt, a massive 270-pound black belt in jiu-jitsu. Patrick Smith, just a massive athletic dude. Is he defeating the Mark Colemans of the world? No. But I'd say the reason Royce is 2 instead of 1 is because of a lot of his detractors, a lot of these unanswered questions. Otherwise, Royce, there is an absolute argument that Royce could have come into UFC 10, ripped Mark Coleman's arm off, and rode off into the sunset as the clear dominant, no questions asked number 1. But we do have questions, which is why he's our number 2.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, man. His strengths, his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the history of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. It doesn't even have to be said.
Totally different level than the competitors.
Yeah, completely. And, man, something that really surprised me about Royce was he was actually pretty aggressive.
Super aggressive.
It wasn't like he waited for them to come to him and then he'll, once he got on the ground, he sweeps. It's no, he went after you.
Yeah.
So...
No, Royce was super aggressive until he was in guard.
Yes.
And then he just absorbed damage, and that's why we kind of have him as number 2, because those were arguably losses. Okay, guys, so these are our number 1s. This is the only place where there was a sort of divergence, and we will explain that away. We have technically 11 people on our top 10 because my number 1, the rightful heir to the throne, is Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock was my UFC 1 to 10 pound for pound fighter of the decade, of the season, or whatever you want to call it for Casual Academy. I cannot say enough good things about Ken. Let's just run through some of his wins right now. Kevin has his notable wins as Dan Severn, Oleg Taktarov, and Royce Gracie. If you've been paying any attention, those are 3 huge names. His losses are to Royce Gracie at UFC 1, which was what I call a surprise. I don't think he would fall for it again. In fact, they fought again and he did not. His other loss is at UFC 9 or 10 to Dan Severn. The one fact is that you could argue a victory for either man. In fact, one of the 3 judges did. I personally argued it for Ken Shamrock. I think Ken Shamrock is just as strong as the strongest guy. He proved to be able to stop the best wrestlers' takedowns. Dan Severn was a monster. No one else could stop his takedowns. He did. He really game planned. He was one of the first fighters to go in there with a plan to say, he even gave an interview after the Dan Severn fight and said, we know he's Greco-Roman. We know he drops his head. We knew the guillotine was going to be there. We knew he was susceptible to this. We knew we could avoid takedowns like that. Ken scrambles better than anybody. He was the most proficient at leg locks, heel hooks. He could be on the bottom and sweep under and sweep people by grabbing their legs. Ken was just advanced. Ken just had positions and submissions, and he understood the octagon and he understood battle. The only thing I would take away from Ken is that a lot of times he didn't have a sense of urgency. He didn't ever have that, like Mark Coleman, I'm going to headbutt this guy until his nose breaks and the ref stops the fight. Also, his jiu-jitsu, positionally speaking, he lost 2 times. He lost control really bad trying to take the back.
Yeah.
One was to Chemo, and it was rather inconsequential because Chemo sucks. But Chemo was a big, strong guy. And then the other time was Dan Severn in the fight that he lost because he tried to take Dan's back, fell off. Dan ground and pounded the shit out of him for like 30 seconds. But Ken got up and got out. And for the other like 23 minutes of that fight, Ken was in control.
For sure.
So I have that victory to Ken, and for all of those reasons, Ken is my number 1 pound-for-pound fighter of the first era of Casual Academy.
Nice. That was good, dude. But fuck all that. Dan Severn is the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter of Casual Academy Season 1.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the notable wins, bro. I mean, he defeated Oleg twice, Tank Abbott, Paul Verlins. I love how I have Dan Severn as his own notable win. He defeated himself, dude. That's how fucking good he is. 2 times champion. And I would argue that his victories were better than Hoyce's victories. I mean, Hoyce has 3 belts, Dan has 2, but I think Dan's competition was better.
Sure.
When you're talking about just absolute aggressive, mauling strength, I mean, Dan Severn is all of that, man. I mean, we have so many highlights of him, from the suplexes, from the headbutts, from the submissions. I mean, he got arm triangles, rear naked chokes. Dan Severn could do it all.
Yeah, he could.
He's super incredibly durable. He has great cardio. I mean, if I had to give him a weakness, I would just say he's bad off his back.
Yeah.
But he's never really on his back because he's that goddamn good.
Well, he was on his back of the 5 minutes that the fight was on the ground with Ken, he was on his back for 4.5 of those minutes.
Yeah, that is true.
You know.
That is true. But hey, when he fought Ken, the 30 seconds that he had top control, he did more damage than the entirety of Ken being in control of that fight. So I think Dan is pound for pound number 1. Go watch his fights. You'll agree. He's the man. Dan's the man.
So I do agree with almost everything you said, and I think Dan Severn is the man. Dan Severn is, 2 fights back to back. We were like, that's the most dominant fight in UFC history. Dan Severn versus Tank Abbott. Then about 15 minutes later, 25 minutes later, that's the most dominant fight in UFC history. It's Dan Severn versus Oleg Taktarov. I will give Dan all of that. Ken Shamrock, Oleg Taktarov twice, Tank Abbott, Paul Verlins. Great victories, super aggressive, love it. However, I believe that when it came time to tangle with Ken Shamrock, he lost twice.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, that was a 50-50 fight, the last one.
Yeah. So, yeah, or a draw. That would have been an appropriate spot for a draw. Dude, that's it. That's our top 10. I mean, there's other guys that were memorable and a lot of things like that, but that is Casual Academy's top 10 pound for pound fighters of era number 1, UFC 1 through 10.
Yeah, this is only from UFC 1 to 10. That's season 1 of Casual Academy.
Yeah. So cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining along. We hope you enjoyed this. Like Kevin said, let us know in the comments who some of your top fighters are from these early UFCs, keeping in mind that we're only going through UFC 10 here. If you do like the content that we're delivering for you, it does help us if you let us know what kind of things you want to see, what's valuable to you, what's not. We're kind of winding down season 1 here, getting close to 100 subscribers, and we definitely want to hit and get over that as soon as possible. So for those of you guys that have been supporting us, thank you so much. Continue to watch along, and we will continue to bring you awesome MMA history like nobody else, fight by fight. So thanks for joining us, guys. We are Casual Academy. This was our UFC 1 through 10 top 10 pound for pound list. Thanks for checking it out. We'll see you next time.
Peace.